Bombshell tonight in the Nolan Wells investigation. A mystery altercation emerges. And not with the guys that took him to the island on the boat. Does this change things?
I just know I've lost my best friend.
This morning, a friend of Nolan Wells, who was with the 18-year-old the day he was last seen alive, is sharing what he says happened during a July 4th boat trip to an isolated barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Trayston Shepard declined to speak with us on camera because he says he and his friends are getting threats.
We did no wrong here, and we don't understand how we're getting so much hate behind it. We all cared and loved Nolan, and nobody wanted to see Nolan die.
On July 4th, 2026, an 18-year-old named Nolan Wells went to a barrier island off the Mississippi coast to celebrate a holiday with friends. He did not come home. His body was found 2 days later. More than a month on, the cause and manner of his death still have not been determined. And into that gap, that enormous, painful gap where answers are supposed to be, a great deal of other material has rushed in. The broadcast we're going to look at today is a good example of that. It's a Nancy Grace episode built around what she calls a mystery altercation. And I want to be careful about what I'm doing here, because it matters. I'm not going to tell you what happened to Nolan Wells. I don't know. Neither does anyone else outside of that investigation right now. What I want to do instead is watch how a claim travels, where it enters, what happens to it on the way, and what it looks like by the time it reaches you. Notice the sequencing in that opening, because it's doing a lot of work. The word bombshell arrives first. The claim arrives second. By the time you hear what the actual information is, you've already been told how to feel about it. And then, almost immediately afterward, she says something I actually think is admirable. She says Crime Stories is not a gathering place for a witch hunt. She says they're here to convict no one. That's a real statement of principle. And she repeats versions of it throughout the hour. I want to give her that. But hold both of those things in your head at the same time. Bombshell, and we're convicting no one. Those two instincts are going to fight each other for the next 50 minutes, and you're going to be able to watch it happen in real time.
If people are sending in videos, they should be using those videos to conduct further investigation.
There is a group of people fighting at 5 p.m. Who are they? Where was he? He wasn't floating in the water. He wasn't on the shore. Tonight, evidence of a so-called mystery altercation is emerging. Straight out to Crime Stories investigative reporter Dave Mack. Dave, what can you tell me first about this so-called mystery altercation? And this is not with the men that went to Horn Island on the boat. You know what? Let me just be clear. Crime Stories is not a symposium, a gathering place for a witch hunt. We want the truth about what happened to Nolan Wells. We are here to convict no one yet. And if evidence of a mystery altercation with other young men arises, we are pursuing it. Dave Mack, what do we know about some mystery altercation? We think after the Triton left Horn Island.
Nancy, this is a mystery altercation that is being described through social media as something that took place around 5 p.m. that day. This is 30 minutes after the Triton already left. And in this particular account, a Bertram boat was seen leaving shortly afterward at a high rate of speed. Now, this social media conversation claims that a person, one of the passengers, pretty certain Nolan Wells, was part of a group that was, quote, almost fighting around 5 p.m.
Bip, 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 bip. Whoa, whoa, wait. Hold on, Nellie. Did you say 5 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. The reason I jumped in, Dave Mack, is because 5 p.m., if Nolan was seen in an altercation at 5 p.m. on Horn Island, that's after the Triton, had already left. Let's see the boat, control room. We're talking about the boat leaving Horn Island. That boat. Had that boat already left when this altercation occurred? Dave Mack, that's a yes, no.
Yes.
Listen.
But the person said in the DM to another kid that is associated, not any of the kids that I interviewed to talk to, but that could be associated to some degree, that knew Nolan, that this person wrote a message saying, me and my husband saw you arguing with Nolan, and to the effect of you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison.
So what is the bombshell? Let's trace it backwards, because this is the whole ball game. What we have is a claim being described through social media. Inside that, a direct message, sent by a person we cannot see, to a second person who is not one of the young men who went to the island, and who is described only as somebody who might be associated to some degree with somebody who knew Nolan. That is the chain. A private message from an unidentified sender to an unidentified recipient at a remove from anyone directly involved, surfaced through social media, and then read aloud on national television. I want to be fair to the reporter here. He says plainly that this is coming through social media. He doesn't dress it up as a police document. That's honest. But once a claim is spoken on a broadcast with that reach, the caveat weighs about a gram, and the claim weighs about a ton. Tomorrow it will be circulating as a thing that happened. Some of you watching this have already seen it circulating that way. And here's what I keep coming back to. There is a version of this same information that would be genuinely explosive. If that person walked into the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, gave a name, and swore to what they saw, that's evidence. That changes things. Until then, it's a screenshot. Now the timing question. This part I understand completely. This is the reason the segment exists, and honestly, the reason it's worth taking seriously at all. Because if that timing is right, it moves everything. The public conversation about this case has focused almost entirely on the 3 young men who took Nolan to the island and came back without him. If there was a confrontation at 5 in the afternoon and that boat was already gone, then the conversation has been pointed in the wrong direction. That's not a small thing. That's the sort of correction that's worth a broadcast.
Nolan and another person that he may have been in an argument with, to me, are people that need to be investigated.
Guys, let me first introduce Cheryl McCollum, Colgate's Investigative Research Institute founder. Let that sink in at coldcasecrimes.org. She's a star of a hit podcast that I have listened to on loop, by the way, Cheryl McCollum. And I don't like much of what you're saying, yet I keep listening. Zone 7, she's author of a brand new book, Swans Don't Swim in a Sewer, solving the cold case of the Flint River killer's daughter, and more. But for my purposes tonight, she's a forensics expert. Greg Morse, before I even get to the merits of this, where I meant to go with this is everyone has been focusing on the young men that were on the boat that took him to Horn Island. Then we get this audio that we're trying to corroborate, where seemingly in the background you hear them talking about trying to revive Nolan Wells on the boat. Is that even real? We don't know yet. Or has it been doctored? Trying to find out. I've got experts telling me, renowned experts, by the way, it's real, and renowned experts saying it's not real. It's just like a trial, right? Where it's expert v. expert, who's telling the truth.
Sure.
I wanted to talk about this mystery altercation. If it happened at 5 p.m., that boat was already gone. Now, as much as some people want to hang the young guys on the boat, I want to make sure we hang the right person. If there is a mystery altercation after that boat lift, we need to be investigating that altercation.
Well, you're 100% right, because the 3 young men that are, at least the people are saying are involved in this, that went there with Nolan Wells, there's a specific timeline from what I read.
Put him
they
up.
needed assistance on their boat. They left at 4:30.
You
They had
just
called
gave me
Cito.
a chill
So
down my spine.
if
You
so,
can't
if there
introduce
is
something because people say, I don't care what people say on either side.
no,
They mean
yeah,
nothing to me. What?
Nancy, that's the problem when we have things like podcasts today and people who are not qualified to talk about serious things like this. They're not experts. They want to get likes. Law enforcement is going to keep information
He
close to the
said he
vest.
saw the DMs. I don't have
Okay,
a
so what does that
reason
mean?
to think
That's
he
not
didn't
legitimate.
see the DMs. Now,
See?
many people are arguing that he has taken a side. We have not taken a side. I'm on the side of finding out why everybody got back to the mainland except Nolan Wells.
Well,
And
listen,
nobody
these
saw
are
anything.
teenagers.
Nobody knows anything. It's just like Tupac Shakur got shot on the strip
Nancy,
at Vegas,
these are
and we still
the-
don't know what happened. Nobody saw a thing. That's BS.
These are
What?
young men hanging out. It's not unusual one mate stay behind to hang out with other people. None of that is unusual for teenagers partying and having a good time. So that fact alone doesn't
Morse,
mean anything. What?
where's your cell phone? Where is your cell phone? And try not to lie. Where's your cell phone?
Okay. Right here.
Oh, really? Because here's mine. So you want to tell me Nolan Wells stayed behind and his cell phone went without him? I understand. Don't everybody start screaming that he didn't want to get it wet. Of course he didn't want to get it wet. But there's ways around that. You can go put it on shore in your shoe like everybody else does to hide it from people and then retrieve it when you go. But no, he let the boat leave with his phone. I agree with his mother on that. That is not Nolan Wells. He was never away from his phone.
So that doesn't mean anything in and of itself with what's coming out about this. You know, you're talking about him staying behind. You're talking about there's evidence that he was there after 4:30 p.m. If he's there after 4:30 p.m., Nolan Wells on that island hanging out with other people, that's it. The fact that a cell phone is on a boat and he's not as a teenager doesn't really mean anything at all.
Okay, you know what? I asked you about a mystery altercation, and should we be looking in that direction right now? And you're like going on and on about the cell phone.
No, but
everybody
that's
that
my
owns
point.
a cell phone, which is everyone,
but
knows you never
Nancy,
leave
that's
without
my
your cell
point.
phone.
You have to look at what really happened. If there was this mystery altercation, then yes, the police need to be investigating that. They need to be looking into that.
So let's put the strongest available fact next to it. GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, reported by CBS News, shows the boat left a private dock that morning around 9:56, arrived at Horn Island at 11:14, and departed the island at 4:31 in the afternoon. That is not a rumor. That is not a direct message. That's instrument data, and it is one of the few genuinely solid things in this entire case. Attorney Ben Crump's office has said Nolan was last seen on the island around 3 o'clock. So the shape of the question is real. There is a window after 4:31, and it is not accounted for. What fills that window, though, is exactly the part where the evidence stops and the speculation starts. And you're about to watch a room full of professionals disagree very sharply about how to handle that. Before we get into it, if you want more breakdowns like this, where we separate what's documented from what's circulating, subscribing genuinely helps. That's it. Let's keep going.
You know what? Let's hear Tatum again. And hey, take it for what it's worth. Try to get the truth out of what we're hearing. Okay? Listen.
Nolan and another person that he may have been in an argument with, to me, are people that need to be investigated.
With that, I agree with Tatum. As much as we disagree on practically everything else, if this happened, and forget about the girl, I'm talking about the altercation. Cheryl McCollum, come on. He dies. Nobody sees him. The others get back safely. Now we're hearing about an altercation afterwards. And I'm not ruling out that he was on that boat when they left. But now I'm hearing about an altercation. When you can't tell the truth of what's happening, look at who was angry. Look if there was an altercation. I don't know what happened, but when I hear altercation, after the Triton left, I've got to go there.
You got to look at it. You absolutely cannot ignore it. But one thing we already know from the second autopsy, they would have mentioned if he had any type of injury to his knuckles, if he had been in a fight. We didn't hear anything about abrasions or bruising or any type of injury that would be indicative of somebody that is a college football player fighting somebody.
Okay, now I have just told everybody that you're a forensic expert. It's starting to taste like a dirt sandwich. Because, okay, I'm going to let you sit in the corner and think about what you just said. Joe Scott Morgan is joining me, professor of forensics, Jacksonville State University, author of Blood Beneath My Feet on Amazon, star of a hit series, Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. He is a death investigator with over 10,000 death scenes under his belt, deaths of all genre. Joe Scott Morgan, let's refresh Cheryl McCollum's recollection. That's what you say in court when obviously the witness is gone off the rails. Your Honor, pause, Your Honor, objection. May I refresh the witness's recollection? In other words, get it together. Don't you remember what we just talked about before you got on the stand and you give them a piece of paper and go, can we see that the drawings on the autopsy control room? Joe Scott, there's a big, thank you. There's a big honking mark, subcutaneous, deep reddening tissue on his occipital. If I hit somebody in the back of the head, it'd be right there. We don't know what that is.
No, we don't. But to Cheryl's point, she's accurate. And here's why. Because in forensics, it's not just about positive findings. It's also about negative findings, those things that we are absent. So in that report, as she had mentioned, there was no indication that there was any kind of contusions on the hand, the arm, no kind of defensive event like a parry with a forearm, scuffing of the knuckles, that sort of thing. This forensic pathologist that did the second assessment didn't see any evidence of that. And so that's the first place I'm going to go to, aside from not having the actual primary autopsy report that has not been released yet. But you've got an individual that has, in fact, been retained by the family that's making this assessment. And it's a pretty damn thorough assessment, as a matter of fact, based upon many of them that I've read over the years. You don't see any kind of insults to the arms, the hands, anything like this. The one thing about that thing in the back, this focal area that they're talking about is, and I come back to this all the time, Nancy, is that his body, Nolan's body, is in such a state of decomposition to this point that he cannot make a definitive assessment on that area. And he did a multi-layered dissection, which, by the way, according to him, had not been done by the state medical examiner's office in Mississippi. He just went about it a different way. And as a matter of fact, if you like that one, I got another one. The examination that this physician in DC did on Nolan's remains ranks right up there with the most thorough, hear me talking, the most thorough dissection that you can possibly do on human remains. It's the same one that we do on bodies that have died, individuals that have died that have been incarcerated, in custody deaths. You know what all that means: in the back of a cruiser, in a holding cell, in a prison. Those autopsies rank right up there with the most thorough that we can go. It's a very deep dive that they did on his body.
Joe Scott, you are stating that due to the level of decomposition in Nolan Wells' body, that you can't really figure out why his occipital bone area had deep reddening, and that was seen nowhere else in the body. That's because of decomposition. Isn't that true?
Well, it's true in the sense that that's what
Didn't
the
you just say that?
I'm repeating what the physician said in his autopsy report. I didn't do the examination.
So then that would be a yes. So at that level of decomp, that you're claiming could obscure the nature of the deep reddening on his occipital area, but yet on the other side of your mouth, you are claiming that even with this intense decomposition, you didn't see evidence of any reddening on his knuckles or any indication of a fight. So you want it two ways. You want to say, decomp, can't tell what that was on the back of his head, but even though he's highly decomposed, I can tell you, he didn't have any reddening on his knuckles. Really?
No.
Because I
Do you
see
know,
a problem with that.
okay, you've skinned your knee before, right? Okay. If you have an abrasion, that's completely different than a contusion. That means you have scraping and the tearing away of the skin. That's something that's very obvious. And guess what? I've been in enough fist fights in my life
I
that
said
I know what
reddening.
scraping. Right, I know, and you're misstating that because it's not a matter of reddening. When we look at hands, we also look at contact points where people are being abraded as a result of scuffing their hands. That's different than a color discoloration. We're talking about the top layer, the epidermis down to the dermis is being scraped away. He doesn't see any evidence of that in his
I'm not
autopsy
talking
report.
about a scrape. I'm talking about if he had, for instance, reddening from a welt, the beginnings of a bruise. With that level of decomp, you're telling me you could still make that out?
No, those two things cannot exist in the same universe. You have to have an abraded area, and there would be multiple of them on his hands if he is punching or trying to defend himself. And yes, we can make out bruises. Yeah, we can make out bruises
You
and
don't always have to have
decomposing
scrapes on
bodies.
your hand when you throw a punch. You don't always have to have cuts on your hand when you throw a punch. That's not true.
Well, that sounds mighty convenient if that's the road you want to go down, because I've seen them many
That's what I'm
times.
telling you. What you're saying is mighty darn convenient. That the reddening on the back of his head, can't really tell anything because he's so decomposed, but you can see his hands well enough to know he was not in a fist fight. Yeah,
Right.
that's convenient, Joe Scott.
he
Look,
was not in
I'm
a
not
fist
trying
fight.
to convict anybody. I'm trying to find the truth. I'm trying to find out if this evidence of an altercation really happened. And to further muddy the waters, now we have more witnesses stating what they saw.
Okay, that autopsy exchange. Rewind it in your head, because a lot just happened. The forensic position being offered is this. In pathology, absence is information. If a person has been in a physical fight, you would expect to see something on the hands. Scraping. The top layers of skin torn away at the contact points. That kind of damage is different in character from bruising, and the argument is that it remains visible under conditions where subtler color changes would not. Nancy Grace's challenge is a genuinely sharp one, and I don't think it should be waved off. She's saying, you're telling me the body is too decomposed to interpret a deep marking at the back of the head, but not too decomposed to rule out a fight from the condition of the hands. Pick one. And the answer given is that these are two different kinds of finding. Read two different ways. Here's the thing. I'm not qualified to settle that. Neither is Nancy Grace, and she'd probably tell you so herself. Neither, respectfully, are most of the people arguing about it online this week. But look at what we're actually all arguing about. This is a second autopsy, commissioned privately, described secondhand, on a broadcast. The original autopsy from the state medical examiner's office has not been released. Toxicology was still pending. We are conducting a public forensic debate on a document most of the participants have not read. That's not a criticism of any one guest. It's a description of the situation everybody is in. And it's worth sitting with, because it explains why two credentialed experts can watch the same case and walk away with opposite readings, and why you should be slow to trust anyone who sounds completely certain right now, including me, especially me. Then there's the claim about someone seeing Nolan and a girl struggling in the water. Watch what the panel does with it, because this is the best moment in the broadcast, and almost nobody is talking about it.
Another report came to me of someone saying that they saw Nolan with a girl, and they believed that they saw Nolan and this girl struggling in the water, not necessarily drowning, but struggling. Like it was obvious enough that the person was concerned when they saw Nolan in the water, and he was with this girl.
You know, that's from Officer Tatum's show. Cheryl McCollum, it seems to me that that's not true. Because don't you think if a witness saw one or two people, quote, struggling in the water, I mean, I would try to help them.
It makes no sense.
And they
That
did
wouldn't
nothing?
be, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. That wouldn't be their focal, that they would pay attention to those two people that are struggling to see, is one going under and not resurfacing? What can we do to help? The idea that they would watch that, see a struggle, and then what? Turn back and finish barbecuing? That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Not at all. So this is a problem, Greg Morse. You're a veteran trial lawyer. We're getting so much information, and a lot of it is inconsistent. And that is why you have cross-examination. So you can test the evidence. Test whether it's true under the fire of cross-exam. When you have conflicting stories like this, my instinct is to go with the one that makes the most sense. What do you make of these claims that Nolan was struggling in the water? I really believe if he had been, quote, struggling in the water, that either she or her friends would have come forward by now. I mean, what about these guys on the boat that had already left? Don't they want to save them? I mean,
Well,
I'm just trying to
you're
find
right.
out
There's-
what happened to Nolan. And if this is true, it may place him on the island after they left.
Well, that's it, and that's what the police are doing. Is they're going to run these leads down, and they're going to try to verify what's credible and what's not before they go to a grand jury. They're going to exclude information that they think is completely uncredible. However, all of this information, if people are arrested at some point in the future and charged with a crime for Nolan Wells' death, then all of these conflicting stories, all of these different timelines, they become a conflict in the evidence. And as you know, Nancy, there's three ways a jury can find reasonable doubt if this ever gets there. And one of those ways is in a conflict in the evidence. So these are all favorable things that would benefit a defendant or defendants down the road. However, there's a reason why law enforcement does investigations. Professionals do it, not podcasters talking about it. Verified sources, all of that is nonsense. The police are going to keep information to themselves. They're going to also keep information private so they can test statements that come from people and verify what they're saying based on factors that don't get released in the media. So clearly something happened after 4:30 when the Triton boat apparently left. And all of these things the police will find, they will discover. You know, the police can discover whose phones were active at the time in that whole area if they choose. May not be able to use it in court anymore after the recent Supreme Court decision a few weeks ago on cell site location information. However, it's an investigative tool that they can line up who's there. They can also line these things up by the boats. Right. And they're calling CETO and things like that. So these are all things the police are going to verify and shake out what they believe led to this young man's death.
I can get the GPS, Morse. I can get the GPS. Yep. I can get the cell phone data. I can get the tracking data. I can tell exactly what time the boat left. But I can tell the truth of that. But I can't tell the truth right now about these conflicting reports. Was he on the boat? His phone was on the boat. That's the whole point. He's traveling with his phone, then he's on the boat. They're saying, no, he wasn't on the boat. Now this altercation has arisen, evidence of that emerging after the boat left. Who's telling the truth? The mom, his mom says, no way would he have let the boat leave without his phone. Okay, that said, the mom is getting death threats. Nolan Wells' mother dealing with not only her son is gone, he's dead. The investigation going on. Now she's getting threats. Isn't it true, Susan Hendricks joining us, investigative journalist, author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi, that someone actually called for an investigation into Nolan Wells' mother? Isn't she a home health care nurse?
She is, and it was an anonymous call saying that she needed to be investigated. To me, it was outright backlash connected to what happened to her son. It's despicable considering everything she's already going through. Anonymous calls to say that she's not up to par and needs to be investigated. It's sickening.
They apply a simple test. If a person genuinely watched two people struggling in the water, struggling badly enough that it registered as alarming, what do they do next? They shout. They point. They go in. They tell somebody. They come forward afterward. What they don't do is watch, turn around, and carry on with their afternoon. That's not forensics. That's not law. That's just asking whether a story behaves the way human beings behave. And it's a test almost anyone can run at home, on almost any claim, in almost any case. I'd encourage you to use it liberally over the next few weeks, because there is going to be a lot of material to use it on. Note also where this claim came from. It was attributed on air to another commentator's program, a podcast, not to an investigator, not to a document. So you have a broadcast reporting on a podcast reporting on an anonymous account. Each layer sounds a little more official than the last, and not one of them adds a single verified fact. And then, near the end, a guest lays out the actual standard, photographic evidence, named witnesses, timing that can be independently placed, boat movement that can be checked against GPS. And the last item on that list is the one that matters most. Will the person come down, talk to law enforcement, and swear to what they're saying? That's the answer to the entire episode, and it comes from the guest, not the host. That's the line. On one side of it you have information. On the other side you have content. I'd note her name is Cheryl McCollum, spelled S-H-E-R-Y-L, and she runs the Cold Case Investigative Research Institute. She's an actual crime scene investigator, not a commentator, and it shows in that answer. Because everything she just described is available. Boats have GPS. Phones have location data. The sheriff's department has publicly asked for original, unedited photos and video from the island that day. The tools to resolve this exist. What's missing is people willing to put their names to what they claim to have seen. And this is where I want to slow all the way down. Nolan Wells' mother has lost her son and is now dealing with harassment on top of it. The families of the young men who were on that island have described receiving death threats. Thousands of them, by one father's account. At least one person connected to that day has retained a lawyer. Nobody in this case has been charged with anything. The district attorney has said the matter will go before a grand jury once the investigation concludes. That is the process. It has not run yet. So when a claim moves from an anonymous message to a broadcast to your feed in the space of about a day, that is what it lands on. Real families on every side of it who are already having the worst summer of their lives. You can want the truth about what happened to Nolan Wells. Badly, urgently, the way his parents want it, and still refuse to hand that want over to whoever shouts the loudest. So let me leave you with what is actually established, because it's short. Nolan Wells traveled to Horn Island on the morning of July 4th. He was last seen around 3 in the afternoon. The boat he arrived on left at 4:31 without him, and without, apparently, his phone. His body was recovered on July 6th. His cause and manner of death remain undetermined. The state's autopsy and toxicology results have not been publicly released. No charges have been filed. Everything else, the altercation, the audio, the struggle in the water, is unverified. Every last piece of it. There is a reward for information leading to an arrest and conviction, and it has grown past the figure quoted in that broadcast. If you have original photos or video from Horn Island on July 4th, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department has asked for it directly, and Ben Crump's team has a line open as well. I'll put the current numbers in the description, and I'll keep them updated as this moves. If this breakdown was useful to you, comment with what you'd want examined next. I read them, and they shape what I cover. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old. He deserves an answer that holds up. I'll see you in the next one.